Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Hope everyone's having a great OC5 so far. So we're here today to talk, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Bigham, and I'm on the developer ecosystem team at Oculus. So we're here today to learn what Oculus developers are doing to get their apps more visibility. I'll first kick things off by providing an overview of some of the strategies we're seeing, and then 3 developers will each, one at a time, present on what's working for them. But before we dive in, I want us first to go back in time to another era, to the 1990s. I know it's tough to remember, but this was a time before we all had smartphones, before we downloaded all of our games and experiences on an app store or the Oculus store, and before we had Facebook and Twitter feeds to give us our constant updates. In 1999, I was in middle school living in Japan. This is me with my friends in front of a life-size Pikachu ice sculpture. So outside of things like that, some of my favorite activities were to go to the arcade at the local mall and play games with my friends and check out the latest and greatest, get photos taken in the photo booths that would add filters to our faces before Snapchat or Instagram did it. It was a lot of fun. So when I was thinking about this topic and what developers can do to get their apps and games noticed, I thought back to this time. What were the developers of the 90s doing to get my eyes on their work? Well, I would walk around the arcade and I would watch all the trailers and listen to all the music and see the branding and bright colors and use that as an indicator of what seemed fun and interesting. To me, this feels a lot like browsing the App Store or the Oculus Store today to see what jumps out and catches my eye. And then, of course, I would watch other people playing games and decide if it was something that I wanted to jump into when they were done. This might be how you've decided what to play this week on the OC5 show floor. And then, of course, there was word of mouth. I would talk to friends at school to learn about what they were really excited about. I would see stickers on friends' notebooks of characters that I wasn't familiar with and wanted to learn more about. And to me, this feels like browsing my newsfeed today, where I can scroll and I can see all the updates from friends on what they're playing or watching. So it turns out there's actually a lot of similarities between what developers were doing then to get eyes on their work and what developers are doing now. Of course, since that time, the ecosystem of developers has changed and grown a lot. In the last 5 years alone, we've seen thousands of creators come into VR with content that's more diverse than ever. We have productivity and education apps that are breaking new grounds in how we work and learn. And we have games like Lucifer's Mask with incredible game mechanics built in to give you the superpower of flying. Have you had a social experience in VR yet? Because physical distance is no longer an obstacle to interact and have meaningful connections with the people you know and love, or with complete strangers, like in Where Thoughts Go, where you can leave behind anonymous stories for future people to listen to. And of course, we'd be nowhere without game developers who've pushed the bounds of VR with full-fledged gaming experiences and artistic masterpieces, like Chiaro and the Elixir of Life. What each of these 3 titles have in common is that they are all created by developers who are part of Oculus Start. Oculus Start is a program that my team created and launched in January of this year. And in only 9 months, we've onboarded nearly 1,000 developers from over 35 countries. Oculus Start supports teams of 10 or fewer developers who have built a VR project and are looking for support, access, and savings to uplevel their content. This year at OC5, we have over 300 Start members. Do we have any here today? Oh, yay! Great. So many of them are wearing an Oculus Start pin, so if you see them in the halls, I encourage you to stop and say hi and ask them what they're working on. Through my work at Oculus, I spend a lot of time with VR developers from all across the VR ecosystem, including Start members. And through this work and in my conversations, I learn a lot about their pain points when it comes to VR. One thing I hear over and over is, what can I do to increase the visibility of my VR application? Developers want to know what tools, what strategies are worth exploring to help them get more eyes on their work. In my conversations with developers, it seems as if there's 4 main categories, and so I've broken them out as so. There's community building efforts, there's paid advertising, there's non-paid forms of outreach, which I'll get into what that means later, and then in-person events. And within each of these, there's several channels worth considering. But before you can dive in and really get started, you need to first assemble a few tools in your toolbox. And by tools, I mean assets. Assets are really important because they are often the first impression that someone will have of your VR application. So you really want to make a good first impression. First off, you need some images. This seems simple, but your images need to be easy for the audience to recognize, and they should be visually representative of your game or your application. And they should also be high quality, of course. Next up are video trailers. Videos should convey to your audience what the experience will be like once they're in headset. There shouldn't be a huge disconnect between what someone sees on a trailer and then what they experience when they dive in. And when it comes to trailer length, I suggest making a really short 5-second clip that cuts to the action in 2 seconds or less. This is great for Twitter feeds, Facebook feeds, and other places where people have a short attention span and are scrolling. You've got to get to the action really fast. And then, of course, produce a longer form trailer for your YouTube page, your website, your Oculus store page, and other locations where people are more likely to invest time. Recently, we've seen a lot of success with mixed reality trailers. I'm sure you're familiar. They require a little bit more investment of time and resources, but people love them. They often can go viral, so I would keep an eye out for that. So now that we have our visual assets ready, get together all of the website URLs and destinations, such as your Oculus store page, your website, where you may want to drive your traffic to. So now that we've compiled all of our assets, let's jump back and start with community building. So when it comes to community, we recommend you explore all of the relevant ones that are out there. If you have a game, make a Discord channel. Discord's great because it allows gamer communities to interact via voice and text chat. Twitter, of course, is a huge, huge community where you can target multiple audiences, from VR enthusiasts to a developer community or general tech early adopters. Facebook, of course, that's our parent company, so we're very familiar with them. There's a big VR audience on Facebook, so I suggest making a Facebook page leading up to launch and starting to engage with your community there. Instagram, also worth exploring depending on your content and your target audience, but Instagram has a really engaged user base and is a very visual community as well. So it may seem like this is a lot. You know, why would I invest all my efforts in building out multiple communities in multiple locations? But it's really in your best interest to do so because this is how you can capture the largest VR audience. Over time, you can test and tweak and refine based on what you learn. You may find that certain audiences are more engaged in certain locations, or that certain assets or certain types of messages are more responsive in certain communities, and using those findings, you can kind of change your strategy going forward. Peter from HoneyPixel is going to go into detail about how he uses community building in his game, Lucifer's Mask. Hold on, sorry, I'm not done yet. So for each of the communities that I just ran through, it's worth exploring paid ads. Paid ads are great because it gives you signal in terms of where your messages are resonating or where your audiences are really attentive. And I want to make a note that it doesn't take a big ad budget to reap some of the benefits of paid ads. When speaking to developers, I've seen that there's 3 main ways in which they use paid ads effectively. Promoting a VR title and driving people to the Oculus store or to the Steam page to download. Building a community, you can target the right type of people and engage with them. And then A/B testing. So this is a great example of where you don't need to spend a lot of money to get a lot of value. You can see which trailers or images or what call to action in your copy resonates best with an audience just by spending a little bit of money on an A/B test. And you can use those insights to drive how you design your store page. There's a few other non-paid outreach efforts worth considering. One is traditional press and media. Go out of your way to build relationships with press and media outlets and leverage them when you're leading up to a launch. They can help you build a buzz and help you really kind of drive traffic to your store page at launch. Also, crowdfunding campaigns are a great way to gain a following and get the word out there. As you may recall, that is how Oculus got its start, through a Kickstarter campaign. Tess from Martov is going to talk a little bit about how she uses her press relationships and crowdfunding in her title, Chiaro and the Elixir of Life. And then last but not least, we have events. So in-person events are great because it allows you to connect face-to-face with your community. Film festivals, many of the most prominent ones, have a growing VR track. These are great for interactive experiences and narratives. It's a great way to get your name out there, build relationships with press, maybe even explore new funding avenues. And Lucas from Where Thoughts Go will be speaking more about that later. Meetups are a more grassroots effort to connect with people on the ground, and it's worth exploring which meetups exist in your hometown. If you don't find one, I suggest making your own. Consumer conferences such as PAX or Comic-Con are a great way to launch a title, get your name out there with consumer press, and get some of your target audience in headset early on to get their input. And developer conferences like this one, too, is a great way to network with your developer community, see what other people are working on, and get your work out there on the show floor. If you haven't yet, check out the developer meet and greet. There's 31 Oculus developers who are demoing their work this week. So again, this might feel like a lot to manage. How do I invest and prioritize across all these event types? I think it's important to identify what your goals are and who your target audience is, and then from there, prioritize your efforts. So those were some broad strokes of many of the creative ways that developers are getting more eyes on their applications. But now I'm going to invite each developer up on stage. So first is Peter Howell from Honeypixel. He's going to talk a little bit about his title, Lucifer's Mask.
Sorry, I came up so early. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Howell. Just a little bit about me. I am the solo developer on Lucifer's Mask, which is available for Gear VR and Oculus Go at my company, Honeypixel. So just a little bit more about my background. I've done social media work as a social media manager for Konami. I've also been a community manager for Call of Duty on Call of Duty Elite. And in the last number of years, I have been a solo developer on Lucifer's Mask. So just to give you a taste of what Lucifer's Mask is and what the gameplay is like, I'd like to start with a trailer. Hey, thanks, guys. That's cool. Thank you so much. Thank you. So what is Lucifer's Mask? What did you just watch? It's a flight-focused platformer, so it takes elements of flying games like Pilot Wings and it mixes them with kind of parkour elements like Mirror's Edge. So two pretty disparate things, but it's kind of like a PB and J sandwich in terms of gameplay. I like to think of taking those two things together. It's also a reimagining of Lucifer's origin. So the story of Lucifer is quite a bit different. It takes place around the time when the afterlife is still in formation, and after God has created the earth, and then he's kind of nowhere to be found afterwards. as the architect of the afterlife. And then it's also my first title as a developer, solo or otherwise. So it was a lot of different things. So goals for this talk. Hopefully you'll come away with more ideas about what to share, when to share, and who to share it with. And please keep this in mind that this isn't a one-size-fits-all. Your mileage may vary for your projects. I'm just using Lucifer's Mask as a case study. So that being said, let's dive in. So one thing that I would offer up to you is to start to share before you're 100% complete. I realize that is a massive ask. If I totally get waiting until things are completely perfect, but bear with me. I think it's really important to learn what type of content gains traction as soon as possible. And what I mean by that is that this first post here on the left takes one of the villains of the game, and it was a post that was done when one of the cinematics was about 80% done, and it was about a year plus before launch of the game. And what I learned was that people were really, really interested in characters, but they're also really interested in the art style of the game, which was really cool, and they wanted to know a little bit more about my process. And it was also something to highlight in future posts. In terms of what you can share, whether it's in-game, Caitlin kind of touched upon it you want to make sure that this is an honest representation of what's in the game. You don't want to put stuff that's like twice the number of draw calls of what's actually achievable on your target hardware. So, obviously keep it honest. And then also consider taking pictures of in the editor view of Unreal or Unity. I'm using Unity here, but it kind of offers a hybrid between like a different perspective that you wouldn't necessarily see in the game, but it also shows kind of a little bit of a behind the scenes view. Another thing to definitely highlight is our controls. I mean, we're breaking new ground here with VR, and that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's exciting from a creative standpoint, but the other side of it is that people may not have any earthly idea how the game controls, particularly with Lucifer's Mask. When I was showing footage of it, people were like, how do you even control that with a Gear VR controller? So it's something to keep in mind. I have a few posts here that highlight that. In particular, one that was very useful is this one on the right, which is just the tutorial for the game. Definitely consider putting that in, because what better way of showing people how they're going to control than the onboarding that you actually have in the game itself. This is another thing that Caitlin touched upon briefly, was reducing as much friction as possible. So for video, you want to front load your content, and within the first 3 to 5 seconds, just have the red meat, just the really great stuff right then and there, just because attention spans are getting shorter and you only have a short moment to get people engaged and get them hooked. One thing that I found was pretty successful for Lucifer's Mask was combining multiple images into a single image. So images that fit together in a particular theme, like this first one on the left, talks about the different traversal modes in the game, from flying, wall running, landing on the ground, and running. And then kind of pulling that string of learning about the content that I learned that engaged with people, or kept people engaged, I did an additional post that combined all the villains of the game together. So let's talk about hashtags, which are kind of a necessary evil. I'm not trying to sound like some sort of social media expert, whatever that means, but these are hashtags that I found to be generally useful across Instagram and Twitter. So Screenshot Saturday is something that the entire indie community rallies around on a weekly basis, based off of everybody submitting their best work of the week. So it can be a screenshot, it can be a gallery of screenshots, it can be a video as well, and I think that that's something that you should definitely consider doing. I would say my best engaging posts have definitely been around Screenshot Saturday. In addition, made with Unreal and made with Unity, I found both engines are extremely great about highlighting indie projects they feel are worthwhile in the spotlight. And I've been fortunate enough to get some attention from Unity in that regard. And then game dev and indie dev, which leads me to my next slide here, which is that fellow devs are your audience as well. Since we're all trying to figure out development workflows and trying to solve problems in VR that may or may not have been solved before, definitely sharing your optimization wins, that's huge, because I don't think there's anybody here who wouldn't love to get an edge on optimization. and it's a way of giving back to the VR community. I think that's really beneficial. Also, productivity wins. I mean, if you're like me, if you're a solo developer, you're looking for efficiencies wherever you can find them. If you're a team of 10, you're looking for efficiencies. It doesn't matter what your team size is. You really want to make sure productivity is at an all-time high. And then new engine feature and API wins. So if you're using a newer version of Unity or Unreal and you're one of the first projects, or you don't know of any other project that's using a newer feature, definitely highlight that. Like that's something that's cool and something that other people can learn from. So let's talk about cadence, and let's talk about where to share. So what I would recommend that you try to do, or at least experiment with doing, is try to get weekly updates at least. I found that keeps people engaged over time, and also if you go like a month without posting, people might assume that you have a canceled project or that you don't know what you're doing. So it doesn't mean that every weekly update needs to be like a brand new trailer or brand new level or anything like that. I mean, you can talk about like UI, or you can talk about optimization and things like that. In terms of where to share, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't matter where you share. You should share to all of them, because your audience, you might find your audience is different on each one. For example, on Facebook, a lot of people are very interested in the story and the characters and the art style, whereas on Twitter, people are more developer focused and like interested on how I achieved what I achieved in Lucifer's Mask. And then Instagram is kind of a mix of both. So again, you never know where your audience is. And another thing to keep in mind is that keep sharing in the back of your head, like when you're working and you see something that's pretty rad in like scene view or game view, just take a screenshot of it. You don't need to write a post then and there, but what you want to amass is kind of this backlog of content that you can kind of pull from later. So let's talk about post-release. So you definitely want to get into highlighting update notes and upcoming features. Updates just across all of gaming, I think, are becoming more and more substantial. I mean, you look at some games that come to market at launch, and then they're wildly different 6 months later, wildly better, wildly enhanced. This first post here is indicative of that. I did an update where I increased the resolution, and then I added contextual UI tips in response to some of the some reviews concerns. And then obviously you want to highlight sales, because that's pretty self-explanatory. You want to make money and get eyeballs on there. And then reviews. I mean, if you're lucky enough to get like a great 4 or 5 star review, definitely highlight that. Cool. So lastly, I want to talk about website and signature. So website, this is the 2 top images are just an example of the Lucifer's Mask post-launch website. It just has a pretty clear buy now button that just takes you to the product page, and then media along with a press kit link. You don't know necessarily who's going, if it's press or just consumers that are going to your site, so you want to make sure you account for both of those. And then finally, email signature. When you're contacting press, I found it's been pretty advantageous to have the press kit, social links, and just like key art or logo for your game, just so they don't need to necessarily hunt around and dig for it. I found that people say yes a lot more often to me when I have that in there, so definitely leverage that. Cool, so that's the bulk of my talk. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully there's a tipper here too that helps you get more eyeballs on your work, and I can't wait to see what you guys share and create. And with that, I'd like to introduce a fellow Oculus Start member and all-around cool guy, Lucas Rizzotto of Where Thoughts Go. Thank you guys so much.
Hello, is this working? Cool. Hi, my name is Lucas Rizzotto. I created a piece called Where Thoughts Go, and let's introduce it with a short teaser. Never mind. So, Where Thoughts Go is a social VR experience set in a world populated by these little creatures, which are voice messages left by others who were there before you were. You can wake up these creatures to listen to the stories that people have left behind, and to progress through the narrative, you need to answer increasingly personal questions and you essentially open up with the rest of the world. And I've done a lot of VR and AR projects over the past 2 years, but the thing that really made Where Thoughts Go different is that we've focused a lot more in real life distribution than usual. The bulk of these being film festivals as well as VR arcades. So I'm going to be talking about 2 of those, what we've learned, and maybe like one of these could be a cool approach for you. One interesting thing about Where Thoughts Go is that initially it had elements of social media and it has elements of gaming and apps. So I had this kind of like existential crisis with like, how do I sell this? Do I sell this as a movie, as an app, as a game? And back then, last year, I didn't really know film festivals embraced interactive content or embraced this kind of weird experiences that don't really have a name yet. So once I discovered that film festivals were embracing those things, I suddenly had a way to roll out the stuff that I was making. And film festivals from all over the world have been embracing these kinds of experiences, and like Where Thoughts Go, I think, has been shown in over 20 film festivals at like 7 countries. So it's been a really great way to put the experience in front of people that don't even have VR headsets at home, and it has provided a pathway for us to introduce all the strangeness we're working on to the world. So if your project relies on narrative more than gameplay loops, film festivals tend to be a really great idea to unveil the projects. And some of the key ones that are big right now is you have Sundance, which happens every January in Utah. You have South by Southwest, which happens in Austin in March, Tribeca, which happens in April in New York, and Venice, which happens in September in Venice. And there's plenty more. These are only a couple, but usually as a rule of thumb, they start to accept applications 5 months prior. I wish I knew that the first time. So it takes a little bit of planning, and if you want to find more festivals to apply to, really just look at projects that have gone to festivals before. Just look at their laurels, get the names, and apply to them as well. I've done it. It's really helpful. And some of the upsides of this approach is like right now, film festivals really embrace the experimental. So if you're doing weird stuff and you don't know what to call it, it may be a good thing for you. And it has been opening new funding avenues from the film industry, which I didn't expect. You have a lot of people from film and Hollywood who want to get into VR and into interactive, but they don't really know how to create compelling stories that way. So these are usually not. It's usually not a lot of funding, but it can range between $50,000 to $250,000, and it gives options to creators, which is what we need. And after a high-profile premiere, funding projects just becomes a lot easier, and it's a good way to position yourself as more than a game, which is what I was personally trying to do. It does give you initial press and prestige. Accolades get projects funded. It's kind of vain, but it's how it works. And the fact that we focused on launching our product in this physical location, it gave us a much easier rollout into LBEs as well as conferences, because we had, from day one, we designed our project to be shown to people in a physical installation. Also, your project doesn't have to be 100% finished when you premiere it. But don't overplay your hand. I did. And this is an image of me actually working 2 hours before the booth opened, adding some much needed, in my opinion, I was wrong, additions to the project. Don't overplay your hand. But it all worked out, and we made a wonderful installation, which I'm going to talk about later. And our premiere was a success, but it also has its downsides. It's hard to get into those film festivals the first time. Most of the spots are already taken by people who have been in the industry longer. You need to shape your timeline to fit the festivals. So, because especially they care about premieres. So our project has been finished for a couple months, but we're holding out launch to next month just so we can make the festivals happy. And there's a little bit of a leap of faith here. You need to have a polished version of your project like 5 months before the festival happens, and you don't even know if you're going to make it in. And some projects are better for exhibition than others. Some of you are working on projects and narratives that span 4 hours. Those obviously are not going to do as well. And sometimes even something like our project, which people sit down and it's more contemplative and quiet, some projects are more fun to watch. from a distance than others. So we've been trying to focus on the installation and these external aspects to make just looking at our projects interesting. And a physical installation is expected, which is it's more work, but it has been like one of our biggest breakthroughs when it comes to events. So we wanted to create a low-budget way of communicating people at events, film festivals, and conferences what our experience is about. So Dara, my colleague, she essentially built a blanket fort, so people crawl into the blanket fort to play the experience. And it really draws eyes at events, and it's probably the reason why we won Best in Show at AWE. The blanket fort it really improves the experience. People have a sense of privacy, and the things that they say in the application are far more touching than they would be otherwise. And we even actually, because it was so popular, we started to make these like blanket fort schematics, and we sent it to film festivals that we wouldn't be able to attend, and we also gave it to VR arcades so they could really design a space for our experience. And there has been a lot of interest in this, and VR arcades, they want to stand out and they want to have these spaces in their locations. So this has been very popular, and we're probably going to be doing blanket forts well into the future. But just one thing with getting into film festival circuit, I showed the project to everyone in person because I didn't want to take any risks, and I wanted to make my case, and I got rejected by a bunch of people, and I kept going, and I asked for money, and no one gave me money because the stuff I was doing was weird, and I came out of nowhere. And I kept repeating this, and it does take an emotional toll. You probably all know it. I mean, you're in VR. You're picking a very hard industry to be in, and being obsessed about the work that I was doing and trying to convince myself that it was super important kind of like got me through, but there were some emotional scars along the way. And just on the subject of VR arcades, they actually have been a really big deal for us. Just Springboard alone, which is one of the key distributors of VR arcades, they have 4 million minutes played every single month, and it's a good way of getting recurring revenue into your application, but also to bring the stuff that you're doing to people that don't have headsets at home. Those are the 3 main distributors in the United States. So you have Springboard, Private Label, and Synthesis. If you reach out to these 3 companies, you can pretty much get a solid foothold in the US as well as some other countries, and you can go from there. Because we were doing film festivals, we already had the blanket for it. The whole experience was designed to be enjoyed in a physical space. It was a smoother transition into this world. And we're making our full digital launch next month, but we're kind of like doing it in sync with the arcade, so our stuff can be enjoyed in physical locations as well as downloaded in the Oculus store. We are currently available, however, on early access. And yeah, I mean, feel free to ask me some more questions when it comes to like real life distribution. And I would like to pass off to Tess. And thank you so much, guys. Ask me questions after.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tess. As Lucas said, how about a big round of applause for Lucas and Peter, as well as Caitlin, who put everything together for us here. I work at Martov Co. I'm a producer there. We just launched our game, Chiaro and the Elixir of Life, 2 weeks ago. Super excited about that. So, yep, thank you. It was pretty great. So let's check it out.
All aboard! We've got a long way to travel, Chiaro, but if we work together, I know we can reach the never-end toolkit.
To enter the fountain, an alchemist had to pass 2 trials, unspeakably difficult.
Great shot, Chiaro. We're an unstoppable team.
It doesn't matter what you're made of.
The 14th Brigade never gives up.
Our bodies are only shells.
Give light to the metal!
It's what's inside us
I'll show you what an alive machine is made of.
that makes us alive.
Life. So wonderful and strange.
Yep, so that's our game, Chiaro and the Elixir of Life. It's Myst meets Legend of Zelda in a Studio Ghibli-inspired world. It's pretty great. It's got amazing characters. You saw Boca, the steam-powered penguin, the peanut butter pig. Everybody loves the peanut butter pig. My personal favorite, Scoria. We're demoing in the developer meet and greet, so you can come on by and try it. If you're listening from home, Chiaro and the Elixir of Life is available today in the Oculus store and on Steam. So, how did I get involved in all this? As you can see, my background's pretty eclectic. I tend to think that VR really draws in people who are really adventurous, open-minded, intellectually curious. So probably a lot of you also have interesting backgrounds, not necessarily just game development. I worked with Martin, who's the co-founder of Martov, in the music industry previously. Actually, the super epic score that you heard in the trailer there was written by Martin, as well as the whole score in the game. And when Martin first put me in the game, the version that was existing at the time, I was completely blown away by it, and I was like, 100% sign me up, I want to be involved in this. So when you have this amazing, gorgeous, riveting product that you know people are just going to be blown away by, the question becomes, how do you get people's eyes and ears on that product? And that's where some of my experience in the music industry came in. So one of the first things I learned in the music industry was no one cares about your music. It's a hard lesson to learn, but it's true. I think it's a lot less true in the VR industry because it's such a great, energized community, and people who work in VR by and large, really, really care about VR. So it's less true, but it's still a little bit true. So we'll talk a bit about how to mitigate that. But what's also true is there actually are a lot of people who really do care. And it's important to give those people the opportunity to support you in the way that you need them to support you. So finally, we'll talk about strategies on getting everyone to care about your thing. So press outreach is a great way to make sure that people who probably want to see your app actually get to see it. And there's definitely an art to this. It can be tempting to write up sort of a generic template and then just spam it to every media outlet you can think of. And you feel like you're getting something done, but in reality, you're really just wasting everyone's time, especially your own time. So taking the time to craft an appropriately targeted, personalized press outreach ask is definitely a better use of your resources. So it's important to know what makes your product unique and valuable. For us, it's the gorgeous aesthetics, the fun gameplay, the great characters, like the peanut butter pig, who everyone loves. One great thing about the peanut butter pig is that he knows exactly what he wants. He's very concrete. He loves peanut butter, and you're going to know about that. So when you do a press outreach ask, you want to be the peanut butter pig. You want to know what you want, and you want them to know what you want as quickly as possible. You want to have a clear, specific ask, and you want to get to it really fast. And like the peanut butter pig, if at first you don't succeed, try again. He never gives up on looking for peanut butter. So it's also really important to be very personal in your outreach. So if you're reaching out to a YouTube streamer who's more casual, you want to have a more casual tone. If you're reaching out to a professional press outlet, you want to be more professional about it. And you want to use a lot of those strategies that Peter talked about in social media to connect with press directly before you do your outreach and after you do your outreach, of course. Another important thing, Peter talked about this a bit, is that it's important to make it as easy as possible for the press to take the next step. So link to your press kit, have copy written up that they can just copy paste into their stuff, include your contact info, all that good stuff. So I don't really like to use templates, but I do sort of use this anatomy that I created to work on that and try to get things done. So this will be available in the deck, and if you have any questions, I'll be in the developer meet and greet after the talk. So like I mentioned before, some people definitely really do care about your app, and if you can energize those people, that can be a really, really powerful tool. Crowdfunding is a great way to accomplish that. Like Caitlin mentioned, it's a concept that's definitely familiar at Oculus. That's how Oculus got started. One thing about crowdfunding that's really great is that it gives you the opportunity to authentically grow a really passionate community around your app, and it gives you an organic platform to release tons of extra content. Like Peter talked about, every new asset, every new piece of content that you put out is an opportunity for people to connect to your app, share it around, and get excited about it. So of course, setting up a crowdfunding campaign takes time and effort, but if you're afraid of spending time and effort on things, you might be in the wrong industry. And we were lucky enough that our Kickstarter was successful on the first attempt. We got a super amazing response from the community. It was really, really great. But the truth is that even if your campaign fails, you can just turn around in 3 months, do it again. The people who backed you before are going to back you again, and you'll already have a bunch of content made, and you'll have all this experience under your belt. So forget that one. So we did learn a lot of lessons during our Kickstarter. The most important one is probably that consistency is much more important than quality. Of course, you want to have the highest quality content that you can have. Your assets should be as good as they can be. But perfect is the enemy of done, and what's really important is putting out content all the time. One great thing about crowdfunding is the connection it gives you to your community. When we had our successful Kickstarter, we opened a Discord channel for our backers who wanted to beta test the game. They got that personal connection with the developers, and we got a bunch of really, really amazing feedback in a super supportive environment from people who really care about the game, and it really helped us get Chiara to the finish line. Another thing that we found to be hugely successful in getting people engaged is free giveaways and contests. It's no surprise, people love free stuff. If you can provide high-quality content that adds value to their lives, you can definitely convert someone from sort of like vaguely interested to very interested, and from very interested, it's a small step to turn that person into a super happy player. So raffles for game keys work really well. You end up getting connected with a big pool of people who are pre-qualified in terms of the fact that they're interested in the game, and they have the hardware that is needed to play it, or the app, or whatever it is. People get super excited, and then you end up with a captive audience of people that are just waiting for you to show them how awesome your thing is so they can jump on board with you. So yeah, thanks so much for listening to me talk. You guys have been really awesome. As a special thank you, Boca, the Steam-Powered Penguin, and I want to offer you a free copy of our art book, a digital art book. It's got tons of amazing concept art, sketches, stories, and other cool content that we collected while we were making Chiaro. It's super great stuff. If you go to the URL and put in your email, you'll get your own copy. Like I said, we're demoing in the developer meet and greet area. Lucas is also demoing his thing. So if you head on over there afterwards, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. I know Peter's going to be there as well. So yeah, come on by and say hi. And of course, Chiara and the Elixir of Life, available on the Oculus store today, as well as on Steam.